All right, Jazz Cabbage Cafe. We're starting right off with the sounds and smells of the Michigan Capitol, where there was a rally today. It's ongoing. It's kind of winding down right now. It's scheduled till 5. It's already 4. I'm assuming a lot of speakers have already done their thing, and a lot of people still left over there networking and listening to some music and talking about how things went today. And Rick and I were there earlier and participated, and I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was really cool. I'm really happy that people decided to organize it and do it. And I realized as I was speaking to one of the press members there, when he said, one of these last times I was here, there was, 700-800 people or something. This time, what do you have, 150, or something like that? Why do you think that there's such a difference in response? And by the way, I don't know what the numbers are. I didn't really pay that much attention to it. I was happy with those people who chose to show up and participate today. But I said, this is interesting because this rally is being done without there being a major threat to respond to. And that's one thing that's a little bit different. We might get a lot more people's attention when there's something very tangible and threatening to, have to face. And this time it was a forum to talk about a lot of different things. A reminder that, hey, we've done some good stuff, but there's still bad bills and bad people out there. And the lame duck session ago, a lot of people addressed that issue. There were some other things brought up. There was some great participation with people from advocacy groups, lawmakers. Obviously, Senator Irwin was there. There was a medical doctor there, and I'm happy that she addressed 5512, bad bill that we don't like. We've talked about many times on here. And go ahead, Rick. Sorry.
But your point about the difference in size of the crowds is very appropriate. The fact is, when people like Jamie and myself and Adam Brook cry out to the community and say, alarm, alarm, alert, we get 700 or 800 people to come to the Capitol. When we say it's not really an emergency, but let's come rally together, we get 150 people to the Capitol.
I think you can rap over the top of this beat a little bit, just what you're saying, but give it a little, feel.
Think this is the system working properly. Yeah, that's right. 700-800 people when we start screaming.
I'm gonna mute it for a second so we don't necessarily have to listen to that. So.
Yeah. Well, it was my very short-lived rap career.
And we'll get back to Eric, who was doing us a great favor, who's been there all day. He's taking a lot of pics, and he's covering some ground for us so we can see what's happening now in real time and talk.
And although you're seeing a kind of an empty Capitol grounds right now, I can assure you when we were there earlier today, there were, a dozen tents or more that were put up, some for people's comfort, but also some from brands and from different things, different groups that came to support the rally itself. And in the past years, we haven't been allowed to do a lot of that stuff. So I see an evolution of thought here. I did see police officers on scene. One guy on a bicycle rode through, a police officer in a Michigan State uniform, clearly could smell cannabis in the air and just smiled from ear to ear as he rode the bike.
So I smoked right in front of the CRA representatives and didn't really think about it too much. And
Richard Clement walked right up with a big hooter in his hand, and I'm just like, that's. Earlier, I had told them, look, we come from an outlaw culture. It's not really fair to ask us to respect all the rules. So, but we did have a couple of guys from the Cannabis Regulatory Agency that stopped by just on a whim to see what was going on, and we had just wonderful conversation with them. The dialogue between those of us who are actively involved in trying to shape laws and the regulatory agency is really pretty robust and pretty open at this point.
It would be cool if Anton was here. So, I'll get deeply into it. I'd like to have him here. We kind of expound on the conversation a little bit, but we've talked about the issue with the possible misappropriation of funds for the veteran research for PTSD and to help avoid veteran suicides. And that was set up via the MRTMA and to give $20 million a year for at least 2 years to go through that kind of research. But the standard had to be FDA approved studies. And just by way of trying to figure it out and set up the proper things, there's people that got probably, headed in the direction of getting awarded some of these funds without having the proper standard of study. And it was recognized that there was probably a mistake, and so they readdressed it. And we'll see it when it actually happens. As like a lot of things, but it seemed as though it was very, very reasonable. Here we go. So I'd like to have this discussion when we have Anton on here, but I know Connie's been very involved in these. She's been in a lot of the meetings. She's talked to Anton a lot about this, and she's very aware of the better direction that it appears as though we are heading. So we'll expound on that subject matter and get into it a little bit more, because that was an interesting process. But I don't know if we necessarily need to go over all that right at the moment. And when we do, we'll bring in some of those people that were involved a little bit.
Well, back to the caregiver rally today, because that's really the top news. Now, there's also a big penalty that was applied to a Detroit cannabis company that we should talk about too.
Sure.
It's, for some crazy circumstance, and it's one of the most hefty and serious fines that they've imposed since.
And some clarification. We talked about it last night, and I was under a different impression of something. I was able to clarify that also with Mr. Harns. So go ahead.
No, so but today's rally itself, you're looking at again another coming together of groups and organizations that sometimes we're aware of each other. We certainly know the different players and different things, but it's not often that we have a chance to get together in the same sandbox and play around for a while. Especially everyone's there for a purpose and to accomplish things. And we did see quite a few cannabis companies, some of them not licensed, some of them which are very successful unlicensed cannabis distribution companies. We did see some of them there as well today too. So there's a lot of folks. GC3, Genesee County Compassion Club, was there. Representatives from Vehicle City Social were there. ASA, I saw, had a table there, as well as, of course, the Michigan Weedsters, who supported.
And Deb's thanking us for our better approach and more professional demeanor than that of Medical Mondays.
I think that's probably.
We'll put it back on there just for a second. And of course, those guys were there. So were Bros Grow Show and us, as far as Jazz Cabbage, and a lot of representation, a lot of advocacy groups.
There. Yeah. Yep. Amy Brown from Abco Labs, just a ton of folks.
Licensed participants, ancillary businesses, advocacy groups, activists, concerned citizens, the same composition of people that came together to really do some good work last fall. Mm-hmm. In a couple of times, and I thought that was pretty cool. And again, we weren't there as we were last time, kind of responding, to an immediate threat, and bills being put through with, seeming good support, and the speaker saying, "Yeah, I think these things are likely to go through," and and all that kind of stuff. And it took all of us working against this mighty force. Really, those guys know what they're doing. They've got the resources and the experience, and it's not easy, but it takes something that we did to do it. And I know there's a lot of and kind of my message today, in part, there's a lot of conflict, within this really diverse community, and that's probably going to be the case. But when there's a serious threat to what's going on, we can put that aside for a second and take care of business. We've done that a few times.
Yeah, and we had people that came from great distance. The current head of Indiana Normal was there, although they live in Michigan. It's nice to see that representation.
And he's in the military, or
no? Retired. He was
retired.
A nurse corps for one of the services. So
right on. He came in uniform, so that was great to represent.
Yep. He said it was in his retirement blues. He was allowed to appear in public in his retirement blues. Let's see.
That's interesting.
Anton says he's unable to join us this show. Just to let you know.
Well, I hope everything's okay with Anton. Appreciate him letting us know.
Yep.
And like I said, we'll have that expanded conversation when he can join us.
Yeah, because Anton's so crucial to the whole thing. He's really been pivotal to the entire story. I will say, too, again, when we hear from a diverse group of voices, then it's important for us to be able to gather together and take inspiration from it. Jamie mentioned the physician that spoke today. She was wonderful. I thought she was great. And we are we're constantly interacting with people who have professional jobs, attorneys, CPAs, people like that. The medical profession, it is still a stigma to come out and support our cause. It's still remarkable when someone who has that kind of a background takes a step in our direction. So I'm always extra appreciative of that.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm happy she was there, and thanked her for being there. Saw her on the way out too.
Yeah.
She had a really good message amidst, a lot of good messages. A lot of us, I did bring up the MSP lab issue. I just still frustrated by the stupid date that they made up. I mean, it's just such they admit to something that's pretty sensational, but they're still sugarcoating it. That's the trouble. That's the strategy there. And I did speak with some press about that, and they said, yeah, that seems weird to them too, but they're not putting out any more information on it at the moment. So there's not much more to get out of that until they decide to put out another statement.
And media can't do much of an in-depth story if one side of the whole story is not talking at all.
Yeah.
Especially since we've got all of the empirical evidence already available. There's no research necessary. We know that it goes back 2 decades that they've been mistaking THC or mistaking CBD for THC for that long. Certainly, those products have been available on the marketplace since California legalized in 1997. So you're looking at that entire time.
And there could be cannabinoids, including CBD, in some of the hemp foods and some of the supplements back then too. There were people that said that stuff to their defense lawyers. All they did was eat this stuff or whatever. Now, you could think they're trying to, maybe get around, the taking responsibility for something. But also now we know that also might be true because they could have teed them up for one of these false positives.
A lot of those attorneys are really good judges of character. And when the attorney says, I totally believe this guy when he said all he ever had was CBD, I totally believed him, and they still railroaded him into jail. That's a familiar story, unfortunately, when dealing with the state police. And Michael Toohey was there too, who recently had a very negative state police encounter as well.
Yeah, that came up too in conversation. And before I space it, I just want to thank Eric for starting the show with us and giving us a little. He got out. He only wanted to be on for the first few minutes so he could go, continue doing his gig there. But I appreciate him giving us a little peek as to how it's winding down at the Capitol. And we'll get back to what you were saying before. But again, this Capitol, this rally was done with a lot of organization, with a lot of thought toward being an open forum, but making sure that the focus, at least ultimately, is on protecting existing rights. And that's one of the things I said too. One of the litmus tests, we see rights trying to be peeled away or unnecessary and costly, impositions being placed on the systems. That's where we start seeing that the law doesn't make any sense, and we have to be in opposition. And if we need to really band together and stop something like that, then we will again.
Yeah. Well, I'll say too, today's rally, I mean, we're still seeing the involvement of senators and House representatives, but I worry what happens when we lose Representative Yusuf Rabi and Senator Jeff Irwin. When those two champions are not there, I'm concerned about who the next line of defense is. Certainly, there were candidates for office that were there today. Evan Space is an independent candidate for governor.
He's a nice guy. He's done it the last couple times around.
On stage day at our rally, he announced his lieutenant governor who's running for the role, as governors do like to announce their lieutenants. And he chose our rally to do it, which I thought was pretty great.
Yeah, man. So he's an independent. He's kind of conservative. He's a freedom dude. The right for people to be able to use cannabis is something that makes sense to him. And
yep. Now, Latricia Matson, who, of course, was the primary driver of this entire thing, Ryan Bringold and Latricia and the Michigan Weedsters. Latricia got just a ton of logos all together on one.
This ambassador program, it was called, yeah.
Yep, and her graphic showing all the different logos of the different companies that declared themselves ambassadors or who were supporting the rally in one way or another. It's really impressive when you look at it. There's quite a few different groups, as Jamie mentioned, regulated market companies like Abco Labs.
Vivid Farms was there. Ty Dutcher, who watches this show sometimes, and he was there with his brother. And
Yep, I tried to get him an interview on Channel 10. So yeah,
Nature's Relief was there. My old stomping grounds of Franklin Fields Botanical Company, etc. Where representatives were there.
Apothecary from Ann Arbor.
Oh, totally. Apothecary was there.
Mm-hmm. So you saw a ton of regulated market, and then a lot of unregulated guys, like we said, Vehicle City, Social, and GC3, and some unregulated market players, because that's what we need to do. And we've talked about this many times. The unregulated market is never going to go away. It might change as far as whether the regulated and the unregulated market, who uses which particular service. But the fact is, we need to learn to coexist. And events like today show that we can coexist on the same piece of property, as long as people just don't try and create problems where they don't exist. That's part of this whole caregiver bill situation that we talked about today.
Yep.
Creating problems when they don't exist. There's no emergency that requires a change to the caregiver rules, and yet they would like to fabricate something that looks like an emergency to make lawmakers take action.
So good. So getting back and including like the TUI situation a little bit, I was also asked by one of the press there, what those who complain about caregivers diverting, taking things out of state, just opening up shop sometimes and selling to whoever or whatever in different circumstances and stuff. And I said that's one of the issues that we have, which is the usage of caregivers. And we have to define what we mean when we say that. And when we are talking about it, we literally mean the caregiver system and those who take care of their directly connected patients. Sometimes they have scenarios in which they have to demonstrate a defense that's allowed, in the act. But we're not talking about people who exceed limits. That happens whether or not they are a caregiver. And, and if somebody takes issue with that, they need to call that caregiver activity. And
that's a tag put on it by big business in order to slam caregivers
exactly
as a negative actor in the industry.
No, exactly. And then furthermore, when we're talking about enforcement, it is just cannabis activity. And if there's evidence, they usually do I'm not sure what they call it these days, but the confidential informant style thing where somebody goes in and makes a purchase and demonstrates the activity that's questionable. They use that as the basis for furthering the investigation, sometimes warrants and stuff like that. But I guess point being, what does work also and has is simply telling the people we're aware that this activity is taking place and you have to stop it. And the threat is that more of code enforcement than it is of criminal enforcement. And the building, the house, the area is then potentially shut down for a year and can't be used at all. And that has been a good enough deterrent, and it has also stopped the activity. And it didn't require guns coming in with
paramilitary raids,
military vision of like taking over the place possibly. I mean, I don't think in this most recent thing with Michael there he was arrested. I don't believe he was. I don't know who was around, who wasn't, what happened in that regard, but it was done raid style. And just a lot of resources there and excessive. It's overreach. And be nice. Part of the change of consciousness about cannabis would be, if things are out of line, let's take care of it, but not with all this excessive and costly and unnecessary just shit involved in it.
One of the things that regulation does is give people who need to enforce the law a variety of ways to do that. So people should not be assuming that traditional 1970s guns drawn, Starsky and Hutch raid style tactics are needed any longer. There's legal remedies, there's civil remedies, there's also just talking to people. And nowadays, with legalization, we envisioned that a lot of these raid situations would go away. And in fact, a lot of them did. But the fact that they're still trying to perpetuate this myth that cannabis is something that could potentially be flushed down the toilet if you tell people you're going to come ahead of time, or if you announce that you're going to be doing an inspection, somehow they're going to get rid of, undesirable material somehow. It just doesn't make any sense. It's no longer applicable in today's market. in today's industry. And it's certainly not applicable when you're talking about patients, caregivers, or just home-based consumers. Anybody at their house should not have to worry about people charging in to count their plants to see if they have 14 instead of 12. And certainly from a patient perspective, although the law may require us to do things like enclose our facility so that it's not visible from the road, is that really an issue any longer? Is it really? Do we need to raid people over something as minor as maybe a fence being down somewhere? Can't we just knock on the door? Hi, I think you need to fix this up, please. Thank you.
Hey, it's 420.
Or not worry about it at all.
Hey, it's 420, and I didn't realize in the area of Jamaica where Reeferman is, Dave Scott, our scheduled guest for later on in the show, they are far enough east, I guess, that it's a different time zone, and I just didn't think about that. And so I fucked up a little bit on the time situation, and he also thought it was the same time. This guy's done a lot of work in New York and other places, so I don't know what to say, but he'll still be on. It looks like, but that's what happened.
Jamaica's a wonderful place.
Yep. It is, and he's growing some really good cannabis down there. And contrary to popular belief, like the typical cannabis you would get as a tourist down there is not necessarily that great.
Yeah, and most tourists are just happy to be able to find a source of cannabis down there. So when they get it, they're not really.
Which is as difficult as asking the very first cab driver or bus driver or person.
True story. We arrived in Jamaica on my honeymoon, and my wife and I leave the airplane, get on a bus with a whole bunch of other people that's headed towards our hotel. The bus driver stands up and leaves. Another gentleman gets on and starts walking down the aisle, and he is ganj, who needs a ganj. Of course, I bought some, right there on the bus, and it was kind of a scary ride, expecting that maybe I was gonna, get revealed as a purchaser, because everybody on the bus saw me and I was the only one. So, that's my story. But it is everywhere in Jamaica. We just recently had horrible hurricanes that ripped through Florida and Puerto Rico, and I wonder if other Caribbean islands were affected.
Yeah. Well, there's some storms that have been through there this year too.
Jamaican sensei in Queens, New York. I betcha. I bet there is a whole
Jamaica, Long Island.
Well, you leave Jamaica, you stay in the Atlantic Ocean, just land right in New York Harbor. It doesn't even have to travel on the land. So easy, so much better.
Oh, meaning Cincy, I think. Jamaican.
No, Cincy. Yes, it's SCNSCI.
Right.
But
okay.
Missing an I. Yep.
And now, and then there was relative times when it was good, but I mean, from today's standards, generally the tourist cannabis is not that great. It's usually pretty wet too, but it's just really humid there. Like you don't need if you have cigars, you don't need a humidor, for example.
Yep.
So
well, I think
just how it is.
Yeah, the moisture and humidity content's usually a problem for us here in Michigan because we have issues with mold and such. And I'm certain in Jamaica they know how to fan the leaves to get the humidity down. Those guys are good at what they do. I enjoyed my time there.
The late Steve Sharp spent a lot of time there and worked with people on working with cannabis in Jamaica for a while too.
He's a fantastic guy.
Something he did regularly, I think around every spring or so. He went down there and hung out for a while and worked with some gardens down there with some people. It's very cool.
He wore flip-flops 365 days a year. Even in the deepest cold, he was still wearing flip-flops and his toes were hanging out. So he did not care. That was his chosen piece of footwear. What a great guy, though.
Yeah, he was into blowing glass. He picked it up as a hobby kind of later on. Had a lot of fun with that. He was always into barbecuing, really good stuff.
Puff Danny was his big friend, and it's a lot of people that are not with us any longer, So, but Jamie, let's talk a little bit about this penalty of the House of Mary Jane. Yeah. So the long or the short of it is, in May of 2021, on May 19th, cannabis at that time marijuana regulatory agency agents did a surprise inspection at House of Mary Jane, which is on James Cousins in Detroit. They found, according to their own statement, duffel bags and backpacks full of cannabis that was not metric tagged, that looked like it was, it was there to be added to inventory. They instructed the people at House of Mary Jane to not destroy the cannabis, to retain it, and also to be prepared to provide the last 30 days of video surveillance for their particular facility. They came back 5 days later on the 24th, and the duffel bags and the backpacks were all gone, and the 30 days of video surveillance was, surprise, surprise, deleted
Somehow compromised by a
accidentally
third party or
by
something.
an outside third-party contractor who did it by accident, supposedly. I believe the doctor is referring to Queen's Cannabis runs from Jamaica at that point, not the story I'm talking about right now.
No, right. I'm just continuing.
Right. Okay.
The story
So at that point, they were guilty of several different infractions, including, not having the video footage, having unlicensed cannabis there, a couple other things. So in December, they were cited for all these violations by the Cannabis Regulatory Agency. That's December of last year. It's now October, and they've just now come to a consent agreement for a penalty with that particular company, House of Mary Jane. The penalty is $75,000 fine and a 30-day suspension of their medical marijuana license. They're in the city of Detroit, so they can only have a medical marijuana license because adult use licensing hasn't actually fully rolled out there yet. So House of Mary Jane, it took apparently 10 months to negotiate what kind of penalty they were going to have. It sure must be nice to be able to do that, I guess. But it is a record-setting penalty, I think. But more importantly, it does show an active move by the part of the Cannabis Regulatory Agency to start policing licensees, which other licensees have said are cheating, are breaking the rules.
Yeah, and as kind of was brought up today, I know I addressed it, but it's been part of the conversation overall that these big money interests or others, focusing on caregivers or just things that aren't, directly, their own commercial interests. What the fuck I'm trying to say here. Anyway, I lost my fucking mind again. It happens every once in a while. It's not new to the show. I forgot what direction I was going in, but it was very important and deep, whatever the hell it was.
Well, the fact is, there's been a finger pointing from licensed regulated industry towards caregivers and the unregulated market, saying you're the reason that we have such a hard time.
I totally remember. You triggered the neuron, and that was essentially to try to direct those efforts and those resources toward trying to shore up the existing commercial system, to actually get the regulations to be adhered to, and to look to make it more efficient, more functional, that kind of stuff, and to be competitive in that way, as opposed to try to hurting other systems.
Yeah,
that's what I meant to say.
I will say that as was mentioned today, I know I mentioned it, and I'm sure others did as well. Right now, at a time when the cannabis industry, the regulated market, is hurting because there's a very low price for cannabis. Every dollar lost is a precious dollar to many of these companies. And if we boycott companies that have things like Common Citizen Cannabis on their shelf, or that have, let's say, Sky Mint Cannabis or any of their imprints on their shelf, some CEO is going to notice and say, we can't take it, even if it's a fraction of a percent, we can't take a loss just from a boycott because we made a decision to put somebody's flower on our shelf. So I think at that point, we have the greater ability to influence the bad actors now than we ever have had before, because their money is so much more precious than it has been in the past. We have the ability, even if we've affected just a small amount, it's a significant amount to those people.
Yeah.
So continue to boycott things like Veritas Cannabis. Veritas is a testing laboratory.
And you mentioned that today. By the way, I kind of I alluded to Viridis, or not. I didn't allude to Viridis. I alluded to the people who now run Viridis when they were cops with the MSP forensic labs. In terms of like skirting science, just manufacturing evidence against citizens. And, they got busted again. I don't know how many other times that's gone on. I don't know how times it's happened for maybe some defense lawyers say it happens for other substances, like this testing's as fucked up for other things too. And so that's a lot of people getting convicted with bad evidence. And that's really not cool. They shouldn't have this lab anymore. They're not responsible with it.
Yep.
That's years of it.
If we go back to the penalty though against House of Mary Jane, that's okay. think about this the time frame. That action happened in May of 2021. If we look at some of the things that we know happened with Viridis, that was in June and July of 2021 and September and August of 2021. We know that there's a court date on November 29th and 30th for the Court of Claims where a judge is going to hear arguments both from Viridis and from the Cannabis Regulatory Agency about the penalty that CRA plans to impose on Viridis for the various violations that they caught them with. So, there's a lot of reckoning about to take place. I'm also told by industry insiders that this is not the only one of these not the only one of these notices and announcements we're going to be able to see about enforcement actions going forward. There will be more because they've been doing enforcement actions, since all the way back then. It just takes the system this long to get that stuff pushed out. And how long that's just way too long.
So there was a mistake made by some last night, by the way that the article read, actually, because we went over it in Medical Mondays. And it seemed as though, and you've already corrected this, but I'll point it out. It seemed as though the problem was noticed in May of 2021 and just acted on now by way of the news about it just coming out now. And I brought that up to Harns, and he's like, well, we were there 5 days later or 6 days later, whatever it was. And that was lost on me before. So just for anybody else, if I am not alone, it wasn't that long in between going back to check on it again.
Yeah, the summary itself was misleading as far as I thought. I also made the mistake between thinking of May 2022 as opposed to May 2021, but I went and read the complaint. And fortunately, the Cannabis Regulatory Agency, when they sent out the release, included both the stipulated order and the complaint as hyperlinks there. And it's so helpful. So you can see beyond just the headlines as to what the details are. And that's how I was able to get the correct timeline on that. I was helped by that by Gus Burns. He and I conversed the other day on email about the particulars of that, and he helped me to open up my eyes and see how I was also interpreting that incorrectly, Jamie. And Gus Burns, of course, a great reporter from the MLive Media Group. So
nice weather in Vermont right now, southern Vermont.
Well, I hope that's actually the state of southern Vermont, not a reference to anatomy, because.
Okay, yeah, might be. Who knows? You're allowed to express yourself on this show. We don't judge. So
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of code words being used nowadays, so they get around the censors. I dig it. I'm not sure what.
I do think that he actually does mean like the degrees in Fahrenheit.
Well, see, look, John Slicker, good peach today. Now that's sexual. Now come on, right?
Well, I know I did not have a very good speech, so he wouldn't have meant that. And he did include Rick and Adam, though, so maybe there's a chance. I don't know. I like being complimented on my peach. I think I'll take that and feel good about it.
I'll let you assume that was about you.
And John was there, of course. It's if you talk about support, participation, understanding, holding down the fort in your own backyard, all these things are helpful to this overall movement over the years. John Schlicker's the man. And he did mean speech. He corrected, so which takes my ego boost down a little bit, but I do appreciate that. At least.
He just said that, Jamie. You believe what you want to believe, man. You live the dream. Live the dream, brother.
John corrected it. It's okay.
But, and again, we talk about perhaps there weren't as many folks there as we've seen in previous rallies, but boy, there were a lot of quality individuals there. you can't start
And there was,
naming names without missing people. But man, there were just so many cool people.
I agree, and a lot of people have weight on this issue in smaller numbers, but like the percentage might be in the minority, but the quality of these particular participants, means a lot. It's a filter for a lot of others coming into the scene, and how this information gets disseminated, and there were very important people there, and also it was organized. There was a lot of reaching out to certain people, organizations, businesses, and that was all recorded, and these people are all bought into the concept of we get together and we be on the same page of these things that we agree.
So much cooperation.
Yeah, and that's sitting there for next time around. Trish and company can take the work that they've done this time around and have a huge head start. It's very impressive to watch this. And again, interesting that we're not responding to a threat. We're reiterating. We're given a forum to make sure people are aware of things, or however you want to look at it. If you cared about the laws, as they said, come here and help protect them in some way. But
that's a rally. That's the purpose of a rally,
yeah.
Not a protest. Is to gather people together in one place and give them information and give them an opportunity to express themselves and grow together as a society. So, and it's great to see Mike Whitty and Adam Brooks, some of the real elders of the community, up there being able to speak today, just like they have in decades past. It's wonderful to be able to continue those type of traditions. And certainly the perspective that they bring might be different from someone who joined the movement in 2020, but is still just as eager and committed as anyone else. So
Mike McCurdy, Marshall, of course, talking about freeing prisoners. And
Mike McCurdy was forceful.
I didn't catch that was him. His hair was missing, and it took me a second to realize that was him. I mean, I did, after a minute, but
nope. Mike McCurdy representing Michael Thompson Clemency Project, and then Marshall Clabeau representing the Michigan Cannabis Freedom Coalition. Two really powerful.
Oh man, just reminded me also of Leah teeing up a little tribute to Zara Abbas, followed by a moment of silence. That was very touching. It was difficult for her to do that. That was her best friend, as we know, and a lot of us touched by that, and
it was special.
And the viewer as a loss, and that was a good move in this whole presentation. I was really happy about that. Dr. Detroit, I brought him. He was not too far from me here, and so he drove over here this morning. We drove out together and drove back. And
he said he was concerned because he thought the dog was driving at some point, because apparently when you drive, you hold the dog right by the steering wheel, so it looks as if the dog is actually moving it back and forth at some point. Professor Whitty was
you want a few extra reassurances that everything was safe, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, imagine living his entire life just to end it as Jamie's, crash dummy.
That would be unfortunate. He has been through a lot, and he's done a lot, and he's one of the decades old, reformist contributors.
Teaches
credible
both
sources
Michigan and in California. Yeah.
He does. University of Michigan, University of Detroit, University of San Francisco. I mean,
plus Oaksterdam.
Yeah, plus the specifically Cannabis School, which is unique and very credible in its own right.
It's prestigious to be allowed to teach an Oaksterdam class because, frankly, they could have anybody do it, and they choose only the best.
And otherwise, a professor, Dr. Whitty of labor relations. And, he gets into some other issues, but he's a specialist there. And
I didn't see Gail. His
well, that's why I drove him. It was Gail's idea that he cross paths with me, and I take him the rest of the way. But I'm down in Ferndale, and he just came from Birmingham, so about very short drive to get here.
Down Woodward Avenue a little bit.
Yep, and it all worked out. I got to talk to him about some stuff on the way. He's also very politically involved, as is Gail. His wife, and he had some very interesting, things to say, political discussions. He gets involved in many issues. He's a party guy, meaning Democratic Party, and he probably used to be a bigger of a partier in the old days, but he's content with a little bit of cannabis these days, it looks like, and still contributing, man, still doing his thing. And
Chuck Ream out there.
There you
Chuck,
go. Sure.
still fire in his belly. Still raising his long arms towards the sky to make it. Love that.
Well,
I'm so
it is
tired.
frustrating, man, when you think about all the people who are in support of it and then the representative decision makers like against it. And, it's just not exactly the system. It is the system, but, more recognition of the collective consciousness of the constituents could be
So
needed.
cool.
Yeah. So Chuck's a big part of all those things. He's a regular, of course, with Hash Bash. He's now regular with Entheo Fest. Try to get into these things. He's important. He's one of the decades old contributors, and that was cool to see him.
Well, and again, we look at our elders. I mean, it's hard to think of someone as old as Jamie as having elders, but actually, there are people older than him out there, and they are.
And one of them is not Adam Brook.
It's true.
Although you might assume so.
Yeah. But the fact is we have voices that have been doing this for a long time. And at this point, we need to do our best to preserve some of those.
Oh, there's people coming in after us now too. I mean, there's these stages kind of people taking a little bit more of the active lead, but
yeah,
still contributing. And I'm really happy for the people that put this event on, man. And that was organized. That was energy. That was thoughtful. I appreciate it.
A lot of people had buy-in. As I mentioned, that graphic, if you get a chance to see it, it has just dozens and dozens of logos from different companies and organizations on it, on the same sheet. People that you might not have expected to see together. It's really cool. So
I don't know if I have that.
It's on our Facebook page. She posted most recently. So, when the legislature finishes screwing around with these elections, because we're pretty confident that things aren't going to happen prior to November 8th. Cannabis is too touchstone of a subject for them to be handling it while voters are still trying to weigh their choice. After November 8th, though, we could see a ramp up. We've seen consistently the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association speaking publicly in media about their expectation that there's going to be a ramp up against the illegal marketplace. And when they say the illegal marketplace, I don't think they mean the regulated players who are doing things poorly, like House of Mary Jane is alleged to have done. They mean mom and pop growing into my backyard, growing in my basement people. They mean people that are growing in a pole barn for 60 plants. That's who they want to come after. They want to come after the us.
Right on.
And that's what we have to guard against. That's why Jamie mentioned at the start of the show, the difference in definitions of caregiver is so important at this point. Because when those of us that have been in the medical program for a long time say caregiver, that's exactly what we mean. 12 plants in a basement, 24 plants in a pole barn, 36 out back behind a fence. That's a caregiver. When the regulated market says caregiver, they're referring to people growing 500 plants in a warehouse in Dearborn. That's not what we mean when we say caregiver. And that's certainly how the legislature is going to interpret it, is the mom and pops growing cannabis that have a caregiver's license from the state of Michigan. It's one of the reasons why we're concerned about lame duck, because we've seen an acceleration of this type of dialogue coming from the anti-caregiver forces, and that usually precedes some kind of legislative action. We've seen it before. Valedictorian. I have a feeling someone's using voice to text, and it's just doing a poor job of interpretation. Michigan will set the tone for the rest of the country. We already are doing that. Keep fighting. Never stop. Always be fighting.
Very nice. I think I got a couple images I can bring in. I'm going to work on that just for a quick second here.
Sure. No, when we talk about Michigan setting the tone for the rest of the country, it's one of the things that was a little bit confusing about Director Brisboe stepping away from the Marijuana Regulatory Agency. We know that in addition to running Michigan's regulatory agency, that he was also president or director of the CANRA, which is the National Association of Cannabis Regulators. That's a big position where dozens and dozens of states are involved. And he was very well received and was appreciated by others in that position. So it disturbs me more knowing that our voice from Michigan is no longer being represented in that regulators association. That bothers me because we do set the example. We do set the tone. We have the functioning system. Now that's absolutely a good one there. I don't know if that's the most recent, but that sure looks great right there. See what I mean? Look at all of those logos on the
And these
same.
people can be conjured back up and information disseminated and responses made and so forth. These are people who care. I mean, companies in some cases, organizations and others. But these are supporters.
Yep. Here you can see organizations on there. Hero Project, Americans for Safe Access is on there too. There's just a Cannapalooza, which is just a fun event every year. Just a ton of folks on there.
Right on.
And yeah, I think there might have been a more updated one, but that still gets the point across.
And then, of course, next week we'll be back there again. Put some energy into the decriminalized nature effort. And these people have been doing a great job too.
Michigan Initiative for Community Healing supports the decriminalization of entheogenic substances like cactus and peyote and mushrooms and other substances of a similar nature.
Yeah. Jen's showing her organization Pecan.
I think that was on. I didn't see that. I didn't look long enough for it. I didn't see the Michigan Normal logo on there either, which makes me think there's another version, but that's okay. So again, we talk about a level of support. That's pretty telling. That's pretty great. I remember when I ran the hashtag No Changes campaign, we had 250 plus, I believe, companies and organizations sign on using the hashtag No Changes in order to support the death of the anti-caregiver bills in the House of Representatives, which seems to have been accomplished. All of the effort Jamie Lowell has been lately on coming up with Senate versions of those bills that they can try and get through the 38-member Senate because they can no longer get those House bills through the House of Representatives. Is that accurate, sir?
Yeah. And they hired very respectful, high-powered public relations organization, including, the type of Democrats that have reached to the Democratic senators who they need to get their message across to and try to convince that these, anti-caregiver bills are necessary. And they use things like the children and just the 5 directly connection patients to a caregiver should have their medicine tested in the same way that the commercial system does, and all types of stuff that they were. I mean, hopefully, we got to remain vigilant. An extra call to your lawmaker or senator doesn't hurt, as said a few times today. Also, hopefully, we've kind of batted that effort down for this session, but anything can happen.
Well, for those of our viewers who are not in Michigan, here's the rules here in the state of Michigan. A voter-directed initiative like our adult use legalization law or the original medical marijuana law of 2008 is a voter-directed initiative. It requires a 3/4 supermajority to change. So even though Michigan has a Democratic governor, we have a Republican House of Representatives and a Republican Senate. However, the Republicans do not have a 3/4 majority in either one of the two houses. So in order for them to pass a change to the medical marijuana or the adult use marijuana laws, they have to have some Democratic buy-in. And we've been able to successfully stop the Republicans from achieving a 3/4 supermajority. That's how we stopped it in the House of Representatives. It is a tough standard to meet. And in this supercharged environment, it's difficult to make those claims anymore that there's danger that needs to be addressed. First of all, we never ever see danger shown to us on our television screens or in our newspapers ever. There's no stories about caregivers accidentally selling to kids or caregivers behaving badly in some way. It just doesn't happen. So there's no sense of emergency other than a regulated market community of large industry players who are trying to carve out an even more exclusive role for themselves by eliminating what they believe to be as a significant source of competition, which would be the caregiver industry itself. Of course, we think that's just a bunch of bullshit, and that they'll never eliminate that market, and that market really isn't as crushing a problem for them as they would like to make it believe.
Yeah. I would agree. I thought that there was an article already posted about the rally, and somebody put something out that was from last year, I think, thinking that it was from today.
Well, there should be quite a few. WILX Channel 10 in Lansing interviewed myself and several others. So that should be a television report. Plus, Grown In, which is a national news publication, was there, as was M Live. And I know there were other cameras from other news outlets as well. I think I saw Gong Wars photographer as well. Nice seeing you too, Jen.
So I was talking about testing before. I think the response to that a little late on the draw, but that's what that was about.
Yeah, a lot of potential ways that people have to fix problems with the system itself. I think nobody from our community thinks that the solution would be to eliminate the number of plants that you can cultivate from 60 down to 12, or that you might eliminate the number of patients a caregiver can take care of from 5 down to 1. I don't think there's anyone that thinks those discompassionate moves are necessary or helpful at all.
I mean, there's people who misunderstand, I guess, what's going on, and might, think that they could be, helpful in some way. But obviously that to me is an exposure of ignorance and lacking good information to work with.
They're not humans. They're chuds. They're cannibalistic human underground dwellers. That's a movie from the 80s. Look it up. Chuds. That's what they are. They're not people.
Some people call them Chads, and there's a Chadbot show that has talks a lot about them.
Chads and Chuds. I saw a lot of wonderful people today at the rally, including Nate Darling and Kyle Miller from Redemption. Just a
Josie Scoggin was there.
Josie and Brenda were there.
Yeah.
You can't have a party like this without Josie showing up.
Yeah.
No way.
But obviously, also Redemption, Sons and Daughters United, Great Lakes Expungement Network, the Firecracker, the youngest or the first pediatric patient to get the card. Lots of good stuff, and of course Brenda, her mother, very big part of everything too, and support for all the work that Josie does. And it was great that they were there.
Yep.
I don't know if there's other lawmakers there. Do you know, besides Senator Irwin, other lawmakers who may have been there?
Yeah, I can't remember any names, but I did see where we're located in the Capitol is a place where people walk all the time, and sometimes lawmakers will come and hang out on the edges, hoping nobody notices them, just so they can view and check out what's going on. And I saw a lot of that going on. A lawmaker and their assistant will walk up and then just stop, and they'll be whispering with each other like that, as if there's something to hide. We're adults in a legalized industry in a legalized state. Nothing to whisper about.
Hopefully we'll revisit this conversation a little bit. Maybe Jen can come on. Latrish come on. I was looking at Jen's name right now and I just said that.
I'd love to get Latrish's thoughts about today.
Yeah, because again, this is a unique, way of doing this, in the organization on one hand, and the timing without what we're used to is, having to do it almost, in protest or response or, some other more dire threat that, needs to be addressed. And it's worth a further conversation. And I do appreciate all the work that went into it. So,
well, Jim Salame, principal from EntheoFest, told me that if if he could get a signal while he was walking in the woods, he would try to dial in today also, Jamie. So,
all right, we'll see what happens if he
Sure
gets
would
his
love it.
signal and comes in the woods. Hopefully, we'll get our international guest, Dave Scott, the Reeferman from Jamaica. But there might be some connectivity issues, and we were wrong on on the time zone. We were both.
You're
were, I
saying
guess.
we in the collective, but I think
Well,
it should be more like
I said I thought it was the same
anyway.
time, and he wrote back. So did I. So I'm
Okay.
going to say we.
You and he.
Yeah,
we haven't talked about the Biden directive either.
And I would like to get to that. And yes, it's true. And of course, Jen was there in support, has been still doing a lot of good work on the local level and other things, and to be recognized as well. The Biden thing, I mean, get out of the way. The freeing of the federal prisoners for simple use possession turns out to be about 6,500 to 7,000 people.
It's not freeing federal prisoners. It's pardoning past convictions.
Okay, then let's get it straight. Pardoning past convictions, and as discussed on Medical Mondays, and as we know, the use of possession is the thing that gets the most attention. It's not selling, it's not producing it. That's viewed as, from a criminal perspective, something is more harsh or whatever. But a lot of people can agree that, okay, people just having it and using it, let's at least get them out of the system. And so it's a little bit of a narrow scope. And oftentimes moving on to conviction federally or issues federally for it doesn't necessarily happen. It's usually the basis for further investigation and leading to harsher things ultimately. And so there aren't going to be that many of them. It is kind of a narrow scope. Some people might call it symbolic in some ways, although several thousand people are affected. So that's cool. And it is a big change in direction, and it was done by a president. And there's a lot of really cool things about it. And we could talk about that. We can dwell on that a little bit and feel good about it, in my opinion. Some people want to say, well, it was only this. And that's true. A lot more to go. And there's
but they say that about every time we have progress. So, Jamie.
Right. That's true. And I'm happy about it, but I'm really happy about the directive to the Attorney General to work with the Department of Health to evaluate the place of cannabis, the scheduling of cannabis. And that is really big. I'm sorry, you can explain in a second, but I just want to add, we wanted Obama to do that. A lot of people were kind of hoping Trump would do that. And now we're here, and Biden did do that. That is big. And that should be recognized as something, this is a pivot. This is a moment here in our progress.
But the question becomes, is this going to be a Schumer kind of a Sanders type of a legalization where it's a deschedule completely? Or will it be something Biden's talked about previously, which is a reschedule of cannabis from Schedule 1 down to maybe something still restrictive like 3 or 4? That's not.
It will be interesting to see what happens. I will say, like, if that does happen, there's still benefits to that. There's benefits to the fact that he made this directive right now.
Yes, there is. Yes.
And if it is passed 2, which it should be, because look at the activity in states. That's not even Schedule 2 activity. That's not reflective of responsibly making an evaluation and believing that for the same reasons that other substances are on Schedule 2, that cannabis would still fit into that category. It's not appropriate. I think Chuck said it, taking it off is the only real appropriate thing, but we have to see what they actually do. Yeah. Going past 2, at least, would affect the 280E tax issue that businesses, which is not being able to write off anything that is connected to the actual.
But although it helps to solve 280E, but it doesn't really solve personal freedoms, and it still leaves in place criminality on a federal level as well. So as a signal of change, I think it's a tepid one at best, although Schedule 3 would have some advantages. There's no doubt.
In evaluation, we'd like to think, and it could be a bubble, and it could be a bias, and all this kind of stuff. I'll disclaimer all that up front. But I do believe an objective evaluation leads to it doesn't belong on the fucking list at all. Yeah. One other thing that's been discussed. Go ahead, Rick.
No, you're absolutely right. What we really need is a robust courtroom style evaluation of the fitness of the application of Schedule 1. And if that happens, and if they try to decide in a courtroom setting based on science and logic where cannabis fits on the schedule, won't be on there at all. Right. If they look at it and they say from a financial benefit for certain pharmaceuticals, we want to drop it down to a schedule where it's easier for them to do research on it, but also and possible for them to capture patents on it, but also not allow the freedoms for the individual citizens to be enjoyed, then that's, in my opinion, a half step when a full step is warranted. And that could very well be.
And I'm getting official word that we're not going to hear from Reeferman today. I'm getting there. Sorry, was sure. Hey, again, sorry, was sure we were on the same time. So my appropriate use of we is confirmed, incidentally, one more time.
I surrender that point then.
I will reach the Wi-Fi connection soon. And then the next statement is, bro, I got here and the place is closed at 4 p.m., which is actually 5 p.m., which is right now, our time. I am so sorry. I'll have to reschedule. I usually have Wi-Fi at home. The storm took it out because they've had hurricane issues too. And it's been 2 weeks. I can't video call on the phone. So we'll have to reschedule with him and do it when we can pull it off. And I had a nice exchange with him earlier. Very cool dude. I do want to have that interview on here. I was looking forward to it today, thinking in terms of we'd have this local kind of conversation about our time at the Capitol. We would have some national perspective by talking about the Biden directive, which we can still get into a little bit more. And then have this international perspective by talking to Reeferman, who's done a lot of cool shit. And he says about 7 different countries. So,
yeah. Well, that sounds like a cool schedule for us to do on another time.
Yeah.
He's a worthy interview. But with the Biden thing, though, we're right when we say this is the first big move from a president of the United States. It's fair to say that we talk about federal legalization of cannabis. That's not going to be one single act. That's not one bill that goes through Congress and then solves it all in one vote. No, it's going to be a series of actions which results in a legalized state for cannabis in the United States of America, including a deschedule, including resolving 280E, including so many other different small little aspects of it. And it is going to be something that we see, incrementally ramped up toward, as opposed to just getting it, wake up in the morning and all of a sudden it's all puppies and happy.
We'll have more shows where we dig like much deeper into all those implications too. One of the other discussions about this is to create a new schedule and to connect it to very specific conditions concerning cannabis. And so they wouldn't be subject to the regular health criminal code that results in, ridiculously major consequences for, cannabis activity and stuff like that. So, and that was also discussed when first approaching, just the deschedule bill in Michigan is introduced by Rep. Robbie right now. That was a result of, going through a few different sessions with him and working on this issue. And that was also part of that conversation. At one time, the LSB, the Legislative Services Bureau, was discussing with his office possibly creating a different schedule altogether that we could then remove from all those other consequences, criminally and from the health code and stuff, and then make its own thing. I didn't like that because I just wanted to rip the Band-Aid off because they were still concerned about all the areas where it reaches in the law. And most of that, though, is dissolved by its removal. So it might even, it have to do with controlled substances, or it might even say marijuana, but that's due to its current position as a Schedule 1, sometimes 2, if it's pharmaceutical grade marijuana by whatever that specific definition is. And, it's contradictory. So.
Well, laws are contradictory. That's one of the reasons why courts have to sort things out, because the common understanding of what's passed.
Or it's done legislatively. When it was tried to be done by courts, it got stopped on technical grounds, not because it didn't make sense. And even Dana Nessel said that.
Yeah.
So legislation is the best way to do it. And it was really hard to get people to, do it. And even though, we do have to sort this out, but there are like things in place in terms of like the time frame of when these laws came in relative to each other, which is supposed to have the superiority when there's conflict and that kind of stuff. And I think even back at the time when the medical marijuana law passed, there was some good reason to start looking at the conflict that existed there and the superiority of that act should have on the law that came well before. But this is all part of the transition into the new world where you actually can conceive of making a leap like that. Hey, you know what? We are joined by somebody, which I'm extremely happy. Carmen heard of
you guys doing?
Carmen Brace, calling from either probably Chicago or Florida or
Argentina.
Are you in Argentina right now?
Yeah,
or Argentina. Right. Yeah, so little south of where I originally thought. So, but I really appreciate you coming on. She had a big interest in this Biden thing. We're kind of talking about that right now too. And I'll tell you what, you know what's going on. He directed the AG to look at rescheduling. He, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
She's so lucky.
Yeah, you're not.
Sorry.
Subject
I can hear
to
you.
this horrible tone.
Okay.
So just so you understand what's going on, and you brought it up with me. There's a pardon for low-level simple possession use federal cannabis crimes, and there was a directive to the AG to look at scientifically the scheduling of cannabis, and there could be some implications. And we started talking about where that ends up now could mean the next thing we have to consider. But your thoughts on all of that?
It's first of all, great to see you guys. Yeah. You were the first
Likewise.
ones I thought of when I think about the years that I've known you and the work that you have done to normalize cannabis before anyone even thought about this. But anyone thought that this was something that should happen. And everything that I learned from you guys from 2015 onward about cannabis as I really began to look at this and think about cannabis in terms of health. And what it could really mean for millions of people that haven't had this as an option within their everyday lives. Last week, I was very, very excited to see that Joe Biden was taking some action on this, because how can we have a $25 billion industry in 2022 and have 40,000 people still in jail for cannabis? It is the essence of the American injustice system. And I know that I have heard this story enough that I want to take this on a broader framework to make sure more and more people understand what's happening in this country. It's got to be freedom for everyone. It's got to be freedom for everyone. When I think about what I personally see, what this means to me, I've been very interested to see all of the legislators. You think about like Nikki Fried in Florida, legislators in New Mexico talking about decriminalization. The fact that all of the states have got to step up and they've got to pardon the people that are currently
that was part of the conversation too. Should have mentioned that. You're right. That was important. Yeah. The support now that states should be able to feel when they do this. They no longer are scared about the federal response because feds just did it, so.
Exactly.
That is important too.
So can we take this, this discussion of states' rights and federalism, which I have, mixed opinions about as we think about it, how it's been applied to women's bodies, how it has been applied in a number of different ways. But in any case, let us use this to move forward and state by state free people that are in jail for cannabis possession, and find ways that we can normalize and help people get out of this business of the American prison system and actually create lives that allow them to have a higher level of well-being, a higher level of access to income, a higher level of access to education, a higher level of access to work. Because it's all a horrible cycle once one gets engaged within this system. And so many people, I think I was reading this earlier today, like 8.2 million people that have been arrested for cannabis possession from 2010 to 2021. And overwhelmingly 80% of them were for cannabis possession. It just doesn't make any sense.
I can't imagine possession being a big focus for anybody. However, I'm very spoiled. I don't leave Michigan, and I'm very comfortable with our set of rules Carmen, you have actually been around the United States in different places where they don't have such favorable rules as we have here. It is a different mindset, right? It's like 2007 all over again.
I think you're right. I mean, I think, even living in Florida, speaking with medical cannabis patients there, and the fact that, they were not able to congregate, the difficulty they had in trying to figure out how they could legally congregate and potentially use the product within a social situation, even amongst themselves. I mean, all of these dynamics, people that are straddling this dichotomy of, I found a product that works for me, that increases my well-being, but it's still against the law, and I still could be put in jail for it. All of this sprouting from just essentially racism codified in the legislation many years ago.
Yeah, to social control.
And how can we stop that? Yeah. So how can we,
about.
how can we acknowledge it? How can we acknowledge what happened? And then how can we acknowledge how that may rear its head within the current dynamics amongst many other issues, right? All Americans have to be treated with dignity and respect. And we've got to respect the freedom and the rights of people to use products that they choose that promote their well-being.
And there are certainly, if we were to...
And no victims.
If we were to flip this around to the alcohol industry and tell people that they had to somehow opt into the alcohol use, there would just be revolution across the United States of America. And I hate to draw the parallel between the two because, there's never been any logic to the war on drugs. And certainly the parallel between alcohol is not always a fair one. But in this instance, I think it is. We're talking about citizens' reactions to stuff. And by the way, medical marijuana polls at plus 90% in the United States of America, and legalized cannabis across the USA polls at plus 60%.
68%.
So, I mean...
And it's in the 90s for medical. I mean, that's done. Everybody's okay with that. And that used to be very low numbers in the old days.
Except for all the states that are either still just CBD oil only medical states or haven't adopted medical programs at all. There are still states like that. Some of our protectorates and territories are far ahead of us and some of our states on that.
Guam. I think Guam keeps on moving forward with policy.
Yeah, Virgin Islands.
You also think about, here in Latin America, I've been spending more and more time this year, but in Argentina, they just passed, this was actually in May, but they're now writing the regulations for the medical cannabis program. And similar to, what we have observed within the United States, it's always been about cannabis and health. So if you think about all of the groups that are moving this forward, it's the Moms for Cannabis, it's for, doctors that are speaking up, similar to, the doctors that spoke up to the Harry Anslinger in 1937, right? Everyone talking about cannabis is a remedy for a number of health ailments, and with research could potentially liberate a number of families that are suffering with Alzheimer's disease, cancer, the ability to kill cancer cells and keep the healthy ones healthy. Epilepsy, we already know. It's not only hurt our citizens from an imprisonment standpoint, it's also limiting our healthcare options.
Especially for children. You mentioned a lot of those which are children's ailments. I know that we have Latricia joining.
Yeah, and I want to introduce Carmen to Latricia and let her know.
On remote.
Yes.
But she's not calling from Argentina, though.
There she is. They're all relaxing, getting something to eat after working really hard today. We had a rally at the Capitol in Michigan, in Lansing. You've been there a few times, Carmen.
Yeah.
Carmen's in Argentina right now, but Latricia's one of the main organizers along with this group called Weedsters. We had Doctor there today that spoke out about the issues, and in our own state, we're dealing with some of these things. And so just, I'm glad that you decided to check in. We want to give you some more congratulations for all the hard work that you've done. We talked about how it was organized and how there was a forum that was set up today that was not necessarily in response to a major threat. It's one of the few times we've gathered there without there being, pending issue that we really need to address right away, and had that sense of urgency that, and that was really cool too.
Yep, everything's energy, and it's time to change the energy in a direction that's forward. And simply put, when you have 63% of the voters that voted in for medical marijuana, that's great and all, but that number means nothing if there's not people behind it. And if there's that 63% are broken up in all these individual groups going in different directions, then that number means nothing. It doesn't have power behind it anymore. So that place under where the levels of oppression are underneath the umbrella and as a whole basically needs to start working together. That's where the whole power of the people situation comes back into play. That's not a new thing. It's just not something that's celebrated. And today was one of those days to find those people, find the helpers, find the ones that want to have that energy and move forward. And it turned out to be a really, really, really great experience. We had a lot of great connections with people. We have some social equity groups from Chicago that came out that collaborated with some of the organizations here. We had licensed facilities here. We had the CRA was here. There was all kinds
That's
of
the Cannabis Regulatory Agency.
Yes.
MRA.
mind-blowing experience. And even though there wasn't a lot of people there, and there are a lot of flowing through, but the right people were there that had these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
The
I
right
said that
people
earlier
were
too.
there.
I agree.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's
So it was a good round table, like an
It was.
introduction of something that could be more beautiful moving forward. So,
And
so
your
we're
organization here has value for the future, as we discussed earlier too. It was really a lot of good work with.
Hey, Trish, I know you made that big graphic with all the logos on it. How many logos ended up being on that graphic?
110.
See,
There's ambassadors, as she called them, Carmen. These are many different entities that just were in support.
companies, organizations, individuals that pledged their support for what we did today.
Yep, and we're gonna get more next year, and we have the emails for all the ones that did it this year. They're gonna know ahead of time, and that program's gonna grow so hard and so fast that we're gonna have to utilize some type of AI program to collect the information because it's gonna get there. It already is in motion. There's more people that wanted to be ambassadors, and we just couldn't keep up with it. So it's very powerful, and we're hoping to continue to grow that energy. It's necessary. People are tired. And it's time to, if we don't start amping up, we're going to run into another election full of legislators that are going to be ill-informed and probably already paid fee there, you know what I'm saying? So start trying to smarten up, quit telling people why we're mad. Let's tell them what we're doing, implement it, and get through it and show it. We don't have anything to stand on except for our own feet. So,
Right on. Who are you hanging there with?
Oh, I got Amy, but she lost her voice today. And then we have Miss Maureen Finn.
Oh, I missed you at the
Maureen,
at the rally today, but good to see you there now.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Good to see you too.
Your support's always welcome, and glad you guys are taking a little break after that long day and hanging out. So good for you on that, and just again, really appreciate the all the support and all the effort for this today, and it's gonna start building a really necessary foundation. So really good work. Thanks a lot, you guys.
Thank you. We're gonna get some food. Thanks for letting us on and talk more about future. We got lots of cool stuff.
Right on.
These ladies are amazing.
You guys rule. Thank you very much.
Oh, I've done that before. The successful aftermath of a big event, and I think sometimes the biggest reward is a great big steak. I did the whole thing so I could get this steak.
I found out that is really just from talking to so many people.
Yeah, sure. That's what the cotton mouth's from.
Very busy. Yes.
Right on. Well, thank you for having us, guys. Thanks for coming out and talking today. Always beautiful, so inspiring. You two are two of the people that drove and going today, and I continue to do it more with you. So, see you guys later.
Really
Bye.
appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So sorry about that,
tell me
Carmen.
about tell me about the rally today. What was the objective?
Well, in past, we've had rallies to tell people about dangerous bills that are proposed that might affect their lives. But in this instance, it was just a rally to bring people together, because although there are some bills that have been proposed, we kind of think that those are probably not going anywhere this year. So the rally, instead of being a call to action, was really more of a gathering and togetherness. And so we ended up with about 150 people, but a lot of those folks were some of the core folks that are really making things happen here in the state of Michigan. Some came from great distance, including at least one gentleman from the Upper Peninsula. And I mean, it's exciting to see that many decision makers and shot callers in one particular place all gathered together, listening to people like the physician that we had today talk. She was so great. And a second or third time I've mentioned her, but she really was quite awesome. I wish I could remember her name.
We had old schoolers. We had people concerned with more contemporary issues, and it was a really good group, as been said a couple of times. And Cass, put that back up there again, was there, and also mentioning. Here we go.
Yeah, Bridget was awesome. Thank you.
Oh, okay, that's a doctor. So so now we can use a name. Okay.
They got it right, of course. Yep.
Yeah.
Bridget. Yes. So
Yes.
the fact of the matter is we were really pleased with the quality of speakers that we had. The media response, Carmen, that we got today was really good too. It's a lot easier now than to get media to come out to our events than it was in 2015 and 2016 when they were all worried that they were never going to be able to pass a urine screen ever again because they were going to walk through clouds of our smoke and stuff. So that did happen today.
Did that happen
And
today?
it was right in front of, I
Capitol.
think at times police, certainly CRA, which doesn't really matter, but and lawmakers, and nobody cared that much really. It was laughed at a couple times, Hopefully people didn't make a mess by throwing roaches on the ground. That's not a good look for us, but
No, but I have
not
to
do
believe that regular cigarette smoking booze hounds like sometimes come and gather at that place are much more messy than we are. We're very earth friendly, conscious people who hate it when people don't recycle the wrapper off of their Twinkie.
well, the roaches are probably biodegradable anyway. So
They're biodegradable. They're got to be paper. It's paper.
It's still not a good look just to throw
From
stuff
the
on
earth
the
to
ground.
the earth.
We don't
But
wanna
yeah,
do
you're right. It's not a good look. No, but it's just fun. And in the past, Carmen, you've been to those things in the Capitol. They didn't really allow us to do things like bring chairs or tents or tables in the past. But that policy they've loosened up on. So we were able to provide like a comfort station. Sometimes it's referred to a big tent that has tables and chairs for people to be able to sit down on. So if they're going to be there for 3 or 4 hours, they can take a load off. It's especially important for some of the ill, injured, or aged people that come to our rallies. And it's nice to see that the Capitol being more forgiving when they make rules for us, letting us do things more like they let other people. It's nice.
Exactly.
Although
Normalize.
we
Normalize.
never should have been discriminated against in the first place. And it sucks having to take your rights back by degrees, but you certainly understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah. But it's happening. And it's so heartening to see movement in the right direction and people getting on the bandwagon of change that benefits the group, benefits the many. I want to do whatever I can to keep that moving. I just actually wrote an article about that today, so we'll see how far I can get that published. But I think it's important for everyone that I do it, that we all do what we can do, so that everyone knows that we've got to be on the side of freedom and justice for people. That's it.
There was a component of people looking to organize. The labor doesn't get attention in this emerging industry. And as part of the event, there were some people there, union representatives, and person Stacy Witrovsky, who's been on the show before. We did a special show about workers' rights one time, and I didn't know she was there today. She's part of Wheatster. She was one of the organizers, and she was helping people out with questions about organizing today. It's her birthday. I didn't know that, so happy birthday, Stacy.
I didn't know that either. Happy
Happy
birthday,
birthday.
Stacy Bass.
Thanks for letting us know, John.
Stacey.
Yeah, very
Nice.
cool person. And
Nice.
this wave of people, the people
Nice.
we just had on, Carmen, and there's like Rick and I were talking about this before too. There seems to be these eras in which people are, different people are kind of leading the charge and involved in a lot more of the organization and stuff. And then new group kind of comes in and takes that place. Not to say that the people doing it before, stay around and remain in support, but it seems like other people come in and kind of take charge and direct some things from the activist advocacy angle. And we're seeing a group of people really do that right now. And it's really cool to watch. And they're doing a great job. And the people that we just had on are included.
Well, I love to see that. I love to see the faces. You think about, how birds fly together, right? Like there's never really one leader. Like there's a leader for a moment, that one falls back, and someone else takes the spot, but everyone keeps moving in the same direction.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
let's do that. Let's do that.
And we talk about decades with thousands and thousands of people to move the needle to where it is. And we had examples of people that were doing it 40 years ago on the stage today. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's important to preserve the stories from our elders because video is so prevalent nowadays. But if we don't get people to speak, especially like John Sinclair and Mike Whitty and
It's
Adam
all
Brooks,
good. Yeah.
those guys, we may lose those stories.
Hey,
And
Adam Brooke,
hopefully-
Adam Brooke was on stage today too. We should mention that he had to struggle to get up those steps, and
Yeah, he did. He
he's an
was
old
a trooper
schooler, too.
to do the testimony, and he could have done it from the ground level, but he chose to be up on the dais on the stairs like everyone else, and that was an important and impressive feat to me. But we have to capture those stories to make sure that our oral history, because it's not written, it is an oral history of our cannabis culture, is preserved any way we can. Certainly, we've seen other people their culture, and why would we allow that happen to us knowingly and with a solution at hand?
Well, I think about so much culture that I learned. I remember thinking, the time that I spent in Lansing listening to people talk about their experiences with the government in the medical cannabis program, with the healthcare system, things that just shocked me to my core. And I knew that I was hearing those stories and I was being shaken for a reason. And I continue to do my best with the work with Governor Pritzker's Cannabis and Health Committee to make sure that those stories are known. With my work with consumer packaged goods companies, with data companies, to also, it's not just a product. We're not just talking about peanut butter here. This is a product that can transform people's lives and has been used for a variety of ways that have not been for the benefit of all. And if more and more companies are getting into this space, then we have to be cognizant of the history and the responsibility that every company has to be part of the solution. It's not just about being a $50 billion industry.
Right on.
We got to do that. So you guys, hey, first of all, I'm just so glad to see you. It is just, it just does my heart good and just reminds me of, what was my beginning. You guys were far along, but how much I learned and how much I'm just really glad to know you. So great, all best wishes from Buenos Aires. And when I get back to, I hope at some point that I get up to Michigan and I can, see you all, and I can just continue to see what's happening in the industry. So we'll be in touch.
Thank you very much, Carmen. Appreciate it. And your message about historical perspective is one that we agree with wholeheartedly. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. We will
definitely
talk
be in
soon.
touch. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
See ya.
That is so cool.
Yeah. I'm glad that happened because obviously Dave Scott couldn't make it on. So it was kind of cool that, and I didn't know it, but she's in Argentina. So we get the international feel that we were looking for.
And did you see how flawless that signal was? I mean, no lag at all. Technology
She's in a nice hotel, probably, I would imagine.
Technology is amazing at this point, but
and she's done a lot. We didn't say it, but she's done a lot of research around data. She's collected a lot of data on
Aclara research, ACLARA. If you want to ever look it up, Carmen Brace has done a lot of that.
Yeah,
and that's marketing research about demographics and how they respond to cannabis and cannabis products. So
that's all true.
Valid.
So very, very cool. And it is also true. It's been a while now. She's been coming. Well, she has been in Michigan, but like since we first met her when she came in to start looking into this stuff. And
well,
really cool.
She's always upbeat and positive. I love that. Just like Antoinette Jameson, just like Hugh, just upbeat and positive. There are just a few people that you can name that are always like that. Paul Talenda is another guy. I love Paulie. I wish Paul was on the show today. So we talked about the Biden thing.
Totally interested in his thoughts on those things for sure.
Paul's another guy, just always happy. When you walk into a room, he's got a big smile and always keeps it. So there are people like that.
People who can accept some things, but her message still very, very well received and very important. And got to stop the big money takeovers and disadvantaging people that shouldn't be disadvantaged. I mean,
we still have a long way to go. One of the things that you heard today, if you were there at the rally, was a number of people talking about the different things that that they need to have changed in order to make the system work better for them. And that includes Jaden's law to help, be able to use cannabis in schoolyard settings, similar to the way that other drugs are able to be administered. There are
The state
descheduling bill that Jamie mentioned earlier, sponsored by Representative Yusuf Rabi, that Jamie put in a lot of time in on himself. But there are a number of different things we'd like to have changed. And it was also mentioned too that by Latricia that this is not just a bitch session. This is a where we going from here session. It was a discussion about possibilities and opportunities. And one of those, the big ones, and Senator Irwin and others said it, you have to vote. You have to be able to participate in the system to choose the people who are going to make rules for you, because otherwise people you hate are going to take that choice away from you. And currently the caregivers and the patients are somewhat threatened here in the state of Michigan. And it's because big money interests really got control of the dialogue in Lansing. And they made it seem as if there was a real problem that needed to be addressed and that they had the solution and they needed to hurry up and get it done quickly. And as soon as we learned of it, we helped to slow that process down so that the truth came out, and the people that they counted on bamboozling into voting for something realized they were getting bamboozled and decided to say no.
Yeah.
And
the truth is that the caregiver system will get small because the other convenient sources of access to cannabis show up in the town, and it's a store and it's easy, and or they can even have it just delivered or, whatever. But there are circumstances where it's needed. We talked to David Harns today about Sunshine Daisy's granddaughter,
Anna,
and the circumstances, of her treatment and all those things. And it's a unique scenario. And, David Harns, who's the media person for the Cannabis Regulatory Agency, said it's a good example of why it's important to keep the caregiver system intact. That should be there for those who need lots of oil, for if they're doing like a Rick Simpson style treatment and they needs lots of oil every day, 90 days, to just buy that directly, retail, that's not feasible for everybody. It's just cost prohibitive. And there are caregivers that can deliver that free or low cost and make that an actual possible treatment, or, something to really try to circumvent the problem. And
many illnesses are strain specific. And many illnesses require specific plants which are not commercially producible because they just don't yield as great as others do. So caregivers and the whole medical system are certainly very important for every pediatric patient and every user under 21 years of age. Imagine this. There's a bill right now proposed in the legislature, Jamie, to make it legal for people 18 years of age to work in a medical cannabis store or an adult use cannabis store, although they couldn't actually purchase any of the product that they're handling, and they couldn't actually smoke any of it themselves because they aren't 21 years of age. Our contradictions are just crazy sometimes.
Yeah, I agree, but I don't mind that at all. I think that's Representative Coleman's bill, actually, and we talked about some of the people that might step up a little bit in absence of Rep. Robbie, and I think Rep. Coleman's one of those people. If not, there's several more, I think. But yeah. So I mean, just Cass is breaking down the obvious need for caregiver system when you're faced with the situation when you need a lot of material.
Well, they're so right. That's a financial burden almost no one can, but and when with no support from Medicare or any of your private health insurance providers, it's not like Dan Kildee's proposed $35 a month insulin cap, right? You can do that on a federally regulated product. You can't do that on Rick Simpson oil.
I don't like Walmart at all, but I do want to say when I was taking care of my dog who was diabetic and needed insulin regularly, I went to Walmart and got it for $25 over the counter. Alternatives were about $150 for the exact same thing at almost any other place. So I'm not a big fan of Walmart for some reasons, but I guess I just want to give a little bit of, people should know about that if they really need it.
When I was raising the kids, we had certain medicines that we needed, and I can't remember, it might have been Walmart or one of the other big chains that would give all of those at a $5 per prescription rate, the certain ones that were
without specific
pediatric.
insurance and stuff, just to help out.
Exactly right, because they
Okay.
knew that was the most commonly prescribed thing, and it was the one thing people needed, and that they oftentimes couldn't afford, and so they just set that $5 a piece. So the doctor's office would actually tell you, I'm going to write you the script, and here's where I want you to take it, because this is what it's going to cost you there.
Here's,
And that was huge help.
Here's Cass. You know, Cass has a background too in science and with pharmaceutical industry, and knows about this type of stuff. But to make it, just to reiterate,
Ooh, Cass's contradiction. They might be terrible employers and destroying the environment and all that, but dang.
hey,
I
if you
love
need,
They're so right.
if you don't have much cash and you need insulin, man, $25 is better than 150. That even if you're treating your pet, that's.
But oftentimes, this is part of the problem that we have in our modern society, is that we want to choose to work with our dollars towards people that we think are environmentally conscious or that reflect our political views. But oftentimes, convenience or accessibility forces us to use people that we know or use companies rather that we know are helmed by complete fuckhead idiots. So sometimes we're faced with that unsolvable contradiction between what I need and how I have the means available to get it. So sometimes you feel guilty about it, but you still have to use the Walmarts of the world. It is what it is.
It started off with, I think, maybe more of an intent to have bulk, to have lower prices for people, something that is more consumer oriented than it, perhaps turned into. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's the reality. That's how that stuff works. And
Love it.
It is interesting to kind of have to deal with that sometimes.
And having seen firsthand how much money is spent on prescriptions for some of the elderly in the United States of America, we do have a problem with our healthcare industry, is just to throw a pill at it and solve the problem. Certainly, the pill solution is not a financially viable one for most people. It's still a very expensive way to go. And secondly, the correlated damage that comes from some of the pills that you're required to take for illnesses that are perhaps not necessarily needing daily medical attention. Sometimes we really are in a conundrum where it comes to making sure that people are healthy, but not over medicating them. And as a layman, I certainly don't know where that line is, but I do feel like sometimes in our society, it does get crossed.
I agree. I guess we have a little microcosm of that within the industry. We talk about some of the places we don't really want to deal with, but they are in inventory because of how they became established for a little while at a particular place or something like that. And you got to kind of deal with them, even though you might not necessarily care for them that much.
Well, I think there's always a compromise. I know that there were times when, as a retail manager, I would be asked to have my employees perform tasks or to push a product that I didn't really think was worthwhile or that I didn't think was a good use of their time. But you have to follow the rules, because you're not allowed to compromise on that. You are not in a position to make a decision like that. And there are a lot of people in some of the companies out there in Michigan in the cannabis industry that work for places that may be owned by complete assholes, but it's just a job to them. And it's easy to point fingers and say, you work for Skymint, oh my God, you vile human being. But really, that's just a guy trying to send his kids to school and pay for groceries. So it's tough sometimes to restrain ourselves from just pointing a finger and screaming at people. Our society so rewards that behavior. Videos on YouTube are always more successful when there's a screaming idiot in them. But we need to have a kinder, gentler society, one that's more tolerant. Cass says, hell yeah. Or people you don't want to work with, but people that you love to work with are already under contract to work with them. Yep. Nobody gets a choice in that. Or they have a crazy deal like 10 for $100 1 gram carts. And how can you keep paying 2 to 3 times as much on a budget? Oftentimes, finances make us do things that we know that we normally wouldn't choose to do.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah, we have to take some of those realities into consideration, no matter how ideal an alternative situation might be.
Healthy choices at the grocery store are another one of those things. They make healthy choices more expensive than unhealthy choices, and therefore many families are forced to, for budgetary reasons, choose things that they know probably not the best thing for them to eat.
Reminds me of when the employees from Flourish approached us at the event over the summer.
That was actually quite nice.
And they were on the inside, and they're like, "Hey, we agree with you. We're trying to work on our." On our managers and whoever else they were in contact with. I forgot the whole story, but new people were coming in to kind of operate things and to input on those things. And they thought there was an opportunity to get a change of direction in that regard. And I think they did. I don't think it's been public, but I think Flourish has changed direction, pulled out MCMA, all that stuff. So, good for them. They really did change that direction.
I think it really shows too that we need to continue to set a good example so that corporate partners like Flourish can stop supporting negativity and keep moving.
Tabs is admitting a position with one of these undesirable places possibly, but that's true. It's a job, and that, that's a reality too.
Certainly in other
industries,
people hate their employer in other industries just like they do here in ours. Go ahead, Jamie.
No, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just continuing,
No.
Just recognizing that is the case. And people who choose to take a job to pay their bills, and in some cases, it's their dream job, and their entry level, position is designed to be improved upon as they stay there and learn things and grow with this growing industry and company, and they move to a place, they put it all on the line, and it doesn't pan out exactly as intended. But you're there now, and that's the reality of it. So. I get it.
When people try cannabis and they get some boof, they get some nasty shit, and it's their first time trying it, and they decide they're never going to try it again, that's a loss for all of us. And that's one of the reasons why we advocate for better quality cannabis to be in dispensaries and to get some of this crap out of there. The same thing with employment, too. You could have someone who so loves the cannabis industry, he's been thinking about this until he aged into the industry. And then he has such a crappy first experience. Now he'll never work for any of us ever again. And then we all lose, because here's a person with promise and dreams and desire and motivation, like Carmen talked about. When you get that fire, it's tough to squash that, but some bad companies can. Some bad companies do just throw a bucket on that fire.
I agree. And some of it's out of ignorance, and some of it's out of just this is our approach, and we're fine with it, and we'll deal with whatever feedback we get from it, but it works for our bottom line.
It's about making incorrect promises up front, though. I think if you tell someone the realities of what they're likely to face and they still say yes, when they face those circumstances, they're usually okay with it because they knew. But when you have, a vision sold to you by some recruiter, and then you get to the store and all of a sudden nothing's like that. You get to the cultivation center and nothing's like that. That's where you lose employees. As a manager of retail and operations for years and years and years, I can tell you, over-promising and under-delivering cost us more potentially wonderful employees than anything else.
Oh, yeah. I would agree. It's there are some of the companies out there who treat their employees really well and should be kind of recognized. I've talked to a couple. I've had the opportunity to point out, some of the issues going on and some of the need for some more labor oversight and attention and consideration, just at large. And we've seen now with this, kind of saturated market, that some of these things show up, and then there is actual layoffs and lots of them at a time, and places closing down, and those people, being left in a lurch and all that kind of stuff. But there, some places are aware of those things to get started with and believe it good business to really take care of the people who are supporting them. And that does go on. Maybe not as much as it should right now, but some places should get recognized for that, because that does happen.
But in a boom market, Jamie, it's easy for employers to be generous to folks. And I'm glad that they did when they were able to. 401ks are a great thing to have, but when cannabis is trading for $110 an ounce, it's a much more mean world out there for cultivators and retailers. And sometimes the extra amenities that came with employment get slowly peeled back. As an employer at Art Van, as a manager, I lost some of my benefits over the years as a result of industry contraction due to economic pressures. So it's a reality that other industries experience. It's never pleasant, though. And in our industry, I think, too, there are some people that have never run businesses before that are put in positions of ownership or in management, and their people skills are not honed the way they would have been if they'd spent 10 years in the trenches dealing with folks and handling problems. So I think oftentimes our industry doesn't treat people as courteously as they probably should be.
Here's probably a good summation of some of this conversation.
Debs writes, I'll keep saying this, the market is great for the consumer, not for the employees. I think that's a good summary of what we've talked about here, too. And it's just one of the reasons why unionization is being so strong.
Yep. That turnover approach, the 90 days and you're out and get somebody else in for $12 or whatever it is, the being left in a lurch kind of thing, as we talked about, some of the stuff that comes over from more seasoned industries, those approaches, and people believing it's just perfectly appropriate to use them here now, no consequence, and it's not quite like that. And that stuff shows up. We're seeing it now in the saturated market, who kind of gets it.
Cass mentioned this one time. They said there's just not a huge pool of people that do some of the things that we do in the top levels in the cannabis industry. So when you screw a couple people over, everybody learns that you're a company that screws over their employees. And then it's much more difficult for you to recruit because you're not recruiting from 9 million Michiganders. You're recruiting from a very small pool of people that are willing and can do the jobs that you're asking. So it never makes sense to me to pollute the employee pool, so to speak, by treating your people bad. You should always be able to exit on positive terms.
They have to have that perspective to know to make that decision.
Any bullshit like that. It should never just be a text message that you got. It's fucked up. Who would do that?
Agree. Well, anyway, so the sterile, kind of approach, and just not being thoughtful of the particulars that go into, a new emerging, industry, helps to expose some of these people. And, that's part of this transition. I mean, there's going to be some good people and some bad people that don't, kind of make it through this time that we're in now. We get into next spring, and the landscape's probably going to be looking significantly enough different than it does right now.
I think that's fair to say.
So,
well, you'll see mergers and acquisitions are huge right now. Companies joining together. Common Citizen and High Life Farms is a good example of that. That's going to accelerate over the winter months. Typically,
did they join forces? Did I talk about that? Okay.
I believe so. So typically, if you look at the sales curve that's published by the Cannabis Regulatory Agency, you'll see that the winter months, typically in the early spring months, are some of the worst sales months for cannabis yearly, with the exception of January. And companies that are already struggling through the months of summer, where they're normally the highest months are typically July or August. Those are the two historically top months of the year.
We're in what's called Croptober right now, but it seems like, there's enough changes over the years that, there's probably an issue still taking place. But I just wonder to what extent, and, what other new world issues are also involved now, taxes, so forth. And
I've seen several people advertising quite boldly on Facebook. They need people to help them take down their outdoor gardens. I need 6 guys who are willing to work. I need a team of 20. For 4 days, stuff like that. There's a lot of outdoor to come down for Croptober.
I've talked to some people at grow shops, though, and generally don't think that there's as many people participating in outdoor gardening this year as in years past, just based on, the items sold pre-season to that. I don't, it doesn't that's not science necessarily. And you're right. I've seen the same things that you've seen, Rick. And so there is the reality of some stuff coming. I mean, didn't
But by the
stop.
same token, Jamie, as we talked about earlier, with the falling price of cannabis, making it far less expensive to buy it than it is to grow it, right?
Right. It doesn't take as much to have the impact. Here we go. Here's some more CAS knowledge and insertion into our conversation, which I appreciate. And might as well read it out loud because we.
Well, it's a bit crazy. They don't know that there are amazing cannabis staffing agencies that have 6 people for 4 days just waiting to work for you. Just call them and pay their fee. Still, though, when you get a call back from somebody that is kind of sketchy, they might be the last one you return that call for.
It might be, but also point taken. Instead of fucking around with dicking people over left and right, just bring in these services when you need them.
Well, I think a lot of times human resources, which is, by the way, a science, it's an art, human resources is, a lot of times people are not capable of handling it, especially in today's litigious society. So they should just have a cannabis staffing agency for hiring and also for handling some of those other issues that Cass mentioned, of course. Lots of solutions now that weren't present even a couple of years ago.
I agree. And again, these conditions make a lot of the potential issues kind of show up and demonstrate them. It's going on.
So I was at a cannabis dispensary the other day on behalf of Redemption Cannabis, and they were actually taking credit cards. And what they're doing is using some kind of a cloud-based PayPal type thing.
Were you at Arborside?
No.
Arborside does a version of that.
Yeah, I'm sure that it's a service that's available to everybody, and a few places do, but it's just a step up. I mean, I'm used to seeing 2 ATMs in these facilities, and sometimes I need at least those 2, if not more. So it's still very much a cash business, but we are evolving step by step into a more traditional retail role. I can pay with cash or card anywhere I go in America, basically, except for a dispensary.
We still need some of these legal things the federal stuff especially with banking, to come around. And the Biden thing is good, man. It's like a part of this larger discussion with all these things that need reform. And the markets, felt as though got more stabilized within cannabis, feeling as though it was heading in a better direction now with that statement. But go ahead, Rick. Sorry.
No, I got a notice from Benzinga too that said that the cannabis market index was stabilizing and actually increasing as a result of the Biden news. But I do wish it had been more than 6,000 people that were positively affected. Some
people call it symbolic. I mean, just, and it might be that, but it's still an incremental move in the right direction. And Cass says they were in Pure Roots in Lansing yesterday. It legit had a machine in it that you give cash to that issues you change. No human needed. That's like a grocery store, one of those self-checkouts, at the grocery store. Well, inevitable. So we didn't talk about it before. It was big news to other people. The people charging a premium amount for products to have certain
shelf
better shelf space where it's more eye level or it's in a better position for
even to get access
or whatever it is. Yeah. I don't really. I mean, I guess I understand that, and grocery stores do that. That's again a seasoned industry that takes that on. But to when it's already rough to get stuff into a store during these saturated times, to tack on some more shit, on the competitiveness level, charge more, and do it on this shelf where everybody walks in and it's at their eye level. I don't like that. Might be a reality. One of these things that we're talking about that we have to accept at some point as a practice might continue. But I don't like adding on issues when there's already issues.
I think what we're looking at is retailers that are going to start losing brands from coming into their stores. So if you tell a brand, I'm not only am I going to bargain you down to the lowest possible price on this, I'm also going to charge you a shelf space fee. On top of that, many of those cannabis brands would just sell at a different dispensary. Let's face it, there's 550 licensed distribution centers in the state of Michigan. You want to be a dick about your policies? people will just go somewhere else. Retailers don't have the power that they once may have had. They may be able to determine shelf access, but if it comes at a cost, that's going to be a problem. And also, I think a lot of retailers, at least cultivators tell me this, retailers are really trying to squeeze them for every dollar they can get. And that doesn't bode well for long-term relationships in the industry. Things may be tough now, but they'll level out to the point where people are able to survive and do well. And they'll remember the people that screwed them over when it was tough. Don't doubt that. Don't doubt it for a minute.
And I just want to reiterate, the concept in this emerging industry, and I make that distinction a lot because it's different than a seasoned industry. We can just shape some stuff. We don't have to fall prey to the stuff that's already, evolved through other, scenarios and that kind of stuff. We can learn from those things, in some cases. So we don't have to succumb to it. I forgot what my next point was going to be, but that happens to me quite often. Hey, we're running down, and we got a few minutes left, and we've mainly just held down the fort here together. But we did get a visit from Eric to start off with, and he nicely showed us. There we go. I'm the one who has inability to function, but Rick's the one who needs to join. Okay, not a problem.
Lots of joints.
And oh yeah, I was about ready to say, sorry, it comes back around sometimes. Part of just the philosophical approach in this emerging industry is to maintain relationships with like-minded licensed companies, ancillary companies, people, and get through the thick and thin times with synergy that comes from maintaining those relationships. And that you see those, you can tell the people who have done that and who have not, especially as another time where that comes up. And Dr. Liebe alone.
That's a great name, by the way.
Is talking about banking issues, and that is a big issue. So are the taxes, and many things on down the line. And Bill Tate was at the rally today.
Yeah. Bill says, great rally today. Good seeing you guys. Great show. Thank you, Bill. You are right on all three aspects of your point. Yep. From New York, don't mind their own business. One of the things we see in other states that are just emerging their cannabis industries is that they are not learning lessons from states like Michigan. They're having limited or no home cultivation. That just leads to problems for you.
Michigan didn't learn from, there was, as we've said it many times before, and we are, kind of closing down toward the end. We created a system without much direction, just started doing it, many of us, Rick and myself included, and it worked. Ultimately, these central locations where the caregivers who had more than what they needed for their directly connected patients could bring it for others to try. And sometimes those connections were made at these locations, and it was very functional. And when the first drafts of dispensaries were made, we based it on that. And we did get the help from the national organizations for that. And they wish they would have included some of it.
Thank you, Karen, all the work that you did.
Marijuana Policy Project. And as far as testing goes, we allowed for it, but didn't mandate it. That sounds, kind of weird now, I guess, to a lot of people based on how everything has gone, but. And of course, Dr. D. Trebizeri is one of the people that helped to kick it off. He's also one of the people who have been doing reform work for a long time.
Mm-hmm. And Cass says, oh man, just crazy. People acting like no one has done this stuff before. Like there won't be a supply and demand issue. Like being first won't be worth anything. People are still getting new licenses in Michigan. And of course, they're completely correct. The fact is, like I mentioned, 500 some dispensary licenses, still adding more. There are over 120 excess cultivator licenses, and they're issuing more every month.
And I guess my point before was that we had this system that worked, and instead of kind of just codifying it and putting some of those regulations on the side, it was radically changed. It turned into something that was completely different. And that's another, scenario in which there was a working system sitting there that could have just been worked with, and opposed to a complete radical departure had to take place with people who didn't know what they were talking about. making decisions. That said, what those people wanted was control of this market. And because some people had dollar signs in their eyes was the reason why we were able to start moving stuff in the legislature in the first place, ironically. So we talk about that sometimes too. And we're winding down. Had a great day today. Our show got altered because Reeferman couldn't make it. It was nice to see you too, Cass. Wish we could have, spent maybe a little more time, but we should do something sometime and fix that. Maybe have Cass back on the show soon. And
David Hards today said, I remember Cass. I always feel like I'm much, much dumber in the conversation when you're in there speaking. And that's true. Cass sciences it up pretty nicely.
Right on. Yep. And good conversations to be had there, and a lot of caring for consumers and for people and for the product and all that kind of stuff.
Personal story. When you have a personal story, you care so much.
Right on. And that's true too. We had Eric come on, help us show the rally later on in the day after our participation. We had Carmen, or is anybody in between? Carmen then came on from Argentina, which was kind of cool. And I'm like, you must be in Chicago or Florida or something, or Argentina. Yeah. That was kind of cool. And Trish and Amy and Maureen Finn all joined in. Of course, Trish and Amy being with Weedsters and really helping to organize today, and we were just impressed by it. And I had another good. Too bad we didn't get Reeferman on today, but we'll have him on soon, and that'll be a great conversation too. But it all worked out. And if you want to wrap us up, Rick, another good show.
What a great show today. Even just the two of us, sometimes it really works out because we get by with a little help from our friends, especially in the chat, and people like Carmen who chime in. Here's the thing, though. We talked a lot about the rally today, and it can't be understated. Togetherness, the peace, the networking that's afforded there. We get so very few opportunities to join together in a way that's outside of the regulated industry. It's very important. And today was a big success. So I think everybody should go to sleep like a child this evening and get up tomorrow, have pancakes for breakfast, and then let's get back to the work of doing good jobs for everybody, really trying to shepherd the industry into a better place.
That sounds good. Right on. Maybe we'll see a lot of people back at the Capitol steps next week for the Decriminalize Nature rally.
Waffles also acceptable. Doesn't have to be pancakes.
Good to know. And with that, see everybody next week. Jazz Cabbage Cafe. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Rick.
Bye, guys.